Let's get something out of the way before we start. Xiaomi. It's pronounced Xiaomi. I'm not going to make you learn the tones for the Chinese, but don't call it Zomi or Zami or Xiaomai. It's called Xiaomi. All right, let's talk about the SU7. Even people that know next to nothing about the Chinese car market, like Western automotive journalists, have heard of this car. Headline-grabbing figures include the fact that they were able to convince nearly 100,000 people to put down an $850 refundable deposit on one of these cars within less than 24 hours of their launch event. How do you convince that many people to put down money on a car from a brand that's never made a car before? First, you need to understand that Xiaomi is a household name, just like Apple. But unlike Apple, they make absolutely everything. A small sampling of the Xiaomi products owned by members of the Wheelsboy team includes a Bluetooth speaker, headphones, a phone, a TV, a battery strip, a doorbell, 2 smart scales, a washer and a dryer, and a handheld steamer. That last one belongs to me. I use it on all my shirts. So they're not some newcomer that's going to collapse at the first stiff financial wind. But you're not going to convince people to put money down on something that reminds them of their handheld steamer. What you will get them to pay for is something that looks like a Porsche. I think it's unfair to call this a copycat of a Porsche, but there's certainly a whiff of a Stuttgart about the profile of it, especially when they offer it in colors that look like they came directly from Porsche themselves. Trust me, people here in China have noticed as well, to the point that at least one Porsche owner saw fit to put a Xiaomi SU7 badge on the back of their car.
You can tear each other apart in the comments about how much of a copycat this really is. For my part, I think it's very good looking, and not just the details that look like a Porsche. Regardless, the styling wasn't the only thing that got this car so much attention, and it certainly wasn't enough to light the internet on fire the way that it did.
No, in order to understand that, we need to dig into what's underneath and inside of this car, and what it costs to buy. The stats go like this. The standard version of this car comes with a single rear-mounted electric motor making 220 kilowatts and 400 newton meters of torque. The battery pack comes from BYD. It's in a blade formation and it's LFP chemistry. Its CLTC range is 700 kilometers. All of that costs just $30,500. For context, all of those figures meet or exceed the all-new Tesla Model 3, all while undercutting its price by more than $2,000 here in the Chinese market.
The same is broadly true for the SU7 equivalents to the long-range and performance Model 3, as they offer similar or better range and performance while being noticeably more affordable. The Pro gets the same single rear motor as the standard, but a larger 94.3 kilowatt-hour Shenxing pack from CATL with a claimed range of 830 kilometers. All that for a starting price around $35,000 USD. The dual-motor Max model gets a 101 kilowatt-hour Kirin pack from CATL with a claimed range of 800 kilometers and a starting price around $42,000 USD.
The SU7 actually comes with 2 different charging architectures, 400 volts for the standard and Pro versions and 800 volts for the Max. If you get the Max, you can charge from 10 to 80% in a little over 20 minutes, whereas if you have a Pro, it takes around half an hour. So this is a small but interesting thing that I noticed when driving this car. Right now, it looks like you've only got one cover, and that's for the quick charging port. But if I flip this over and follow the instructions that are written on the outside here, boom. It's also the cover for the slow charging port too. Pretty clever. So the specs are good, but there's even more to it than that. Recall that Xiaomi makes all of those different devices. Well, most of those devices are smart devices. That means that your Xiaomi car is now part of an ecosystem of over 1,000 Xiaomi smart devices. It can interact with them, and they can interact with it. An example would be some of these smart scenarios that you can set up inside of your SU7. Let's say you have one called Going Home. It turns the air conditioning to a certain temperature, it turns on your heated seats, and then it plays a playlist that you like. That's great, but other cars can already do that. What they can't do is interact with your Xiaomi smart devices that are at your house. So now when you activate the going home mode, it also turns on your Xiaomi smart air conditioner, so your house is comfortable by the time you get back. Or you can actually set it to be geofenced, so when your car gets close enough, it will turn on your Xiaomi smart lights inside of your house so you don't come home to a dark home. Here's another one. Let's say you went to run an errand and you left your dog at home. You want to see how your dog is doing. No problem. You can use the center screen to tap into your Xiaomi smart cameras that you've set up inside of your house. It works the other way as well. Let's say that it's summer. You know the car is going to be really, really hot when you get in, and you want to make sure that the air conditioning and the ventilated seats are blasting before you go down to get inside of your car. Thankfully, you have a Xiaomi smart speaker. They're equivalent to an Amazon Alexa or Apple HomePod. You can issue voice commands from the comfort of your home to that smart speaker, which will then control your car in the driveway, making sure that by the time you get in, it's very comfortable. If you're sitting there thinking to yourself, I don't care about any of this. I don't have any smart devices. I would never use any of that. I understand. I'm probably closer to you than I am to the people I'm describing in these scenarios. And I'm not saying that every SU7 owner is going to take the time to connect their car to their smart microwave to make sure that their popcorn is pre-popped by the time they get home. But they could. And that potential convenience is a serious selling point, especially here in China where Xiaomi products are so ubiquitous. Let's say you're one of the people above. You don't care about any of this smart device nonsense. You just care about how an interior looks and feels. Huge surprise. Xiaomi delivers a lot of bang for your buck when it comes to that as well. With a starting price a little under 31,000 US dollars, you can't expect the world when it comes to interior material quality, but I would say at this price point, it over-delivers. This is a Founders Edition, which means it has a few things that come standard that are extra cost options on other cars. For example, the 25-speaker sound system or the real Mappa leather seats, which are soft and supportive. The other interior materials, well, there's definitely plenty of plastic pieces, but those are, by plastic standards, pretty nice feeling. There's also some real metal trim as well, and soft touch areas where you want soft touch areas. Panel gaps. Yes, there are some areas where the panel gaps could be better, but honestly, I don't think buyers care about that nearly as much as most people pretend that they do. What they care about are all the other features that are inside of this car.
I'm talking about things like the standard 16.1-inch screen with Xiaomi's Hyper OS. I really like the layout of the menus, the modularity, and the aesthetic of the whole thing. And thanks to a Snapdragon 8295 processor, I like how responsive it is too. I would still prefer physical buttons for a lot of functions, but Xiaomi has a solution for that, and it's one that I wish someone had thought of years ago.
Xiaomi offers a bunch of attachments that you can add to your center screen. That includes a row of physical buttons that you can attach to the very bottom right here. I used it in the first SU7 that I drove, and it works perfectly. It feels really solid, and there's zero lag between the commands and what happens on the center screen. It's also got a big, round volume knob in the middle with a pause play button. I absolutely love it. They have other attachments as well. There's a wireless phone mount, wireless charging phone mount rather, that can go right here, as well as dual gauges that go on the back right there. They can show your compass directions as well as your charge and your speed, and a G meter, by the way, if that's what you're into. I love this concept, and it's something that only Xiaomi could do because they have experience manufacturing pretty much every kind of conceivable device. I think it's genius, and I hope that other brands start doing it as well. Our car has one of the less useful attachments than you can get. These auxiliary mood light things here on the side which react to sounds that happen inside of the car, including my voice, as you can see. I turn these off within about 5 minutes of picking the car up. I find them to be annoying, but your mileage may vary. The other optional feature that we have on the front row here is the fragrance suspension system right there. That, I think, is pretty great. There's a 56-inch heads-up display, but that's only available on the max or top trim level cars. Standard cars like this and pro or mid-spec cars make do without, but all cars do get this cool little instrument cluster screen, which, when I turn on the car like that, flips to reveal your LCD instrument cluster. What I like much more than that is this steering wheel. I love the shape of it. I like the feel of it. I like the physical buttons and how you interact with them and how they're placed. Down here, you've got two little nubbins. On the left is a button for turning on and off your driver assistance system, and on your right is a scroll wheel for changing your drive mode. More on both of those later. First, let's talk about the second row. Legroom is no problem back here thanks to a 3-meter wheelbase, but headroom, yeah, that's kind of at a premium. I am 5'9" tall, or about 1.75 meters, and as you can see, I fit, but someone much taller than me would have a hard time back here. Tall people need not apply. The seating position itself, however, for, again, someone my height, is actually quite good. You've got good lower back support in this seat, as well as a good angle, no adjustment there. And because of the long seat bottoms and plenty of space to put your feet, you can achieve quite a comfortable seating position. This does have heated second row seats as standard, but that only proves to draw attention to the fact that it lacks something in the front row, and that's massaging seats. Massaging seats are optional in a bunch of cars from this particular price segment, so I'm a bit surprised that they didn't make them available on the SU7. I mentioned that Founders Edition cars like this come standard with certain features that are extra cost on other cars, and that includes one here in the second row. The refrigerator. Yes, this sedan has a refrigerator in the second row, right below the 2 USB charging ports. This thing can keep your contents between 2 and 15 degrees Celsius. Not crazy performance considering what something like the refrigerator/heater in a Li Auto can do, but still definitely a useful feature. You can also get rear screens in this car, but the way they do it is pretty interesting. When I say you can get rear screens, what I mean is that Xiaomi will sell you a mount, which goes right here in this hole, and then you can put a Xiaomi brand tablet onto that mount. I have used them. They were in the first car that I experienced, and they integrate very well with the overall system. However, the way they're mounted feels wobbly. It feels cheap, to be honest.
The trunk on the SU7 measures 517 liters, with a surprisingly massive compartment under the floor. That's smaller than the Model 3's 594 liters, but the SU7 snatches the win when it comes to the frunk, which measures an impressive 105 liters.
So we've got a car with great connectivity and range, not to mention a gigantic frunk. But if it's going to be a world beater, it also needs to drive like one. Xiaomi's also been talking a big game when it comes to the way this car is going to drive. Take, for example, the fact that this thing's chassis is called the Modena chassis architecture. Yes, Modena, the city we'll all associate with Ferrari. The hyper-engine electric motor family, that's their name for all their electric motors. Well, the 3 electric motors within that family have been dubbed separately the V6, the V6S, and the V8S. It would seem that Xiaomi, in addition to courting smart home enthusiasts and hypermilers, is also going after people who actually like to drive their car by promising a driver-focused EV sedan. I have driven both the single and dual motor versions of this car, and I believe that they have actually delivered on that promise. Mostly. Speed is no problem regardless of which version of the SU7 that you get. Standard and Pro cars manage a 0 to 100 km/h, 62 mph sprint in just 5.3 and 5.7 seconds, respectively. Note that the Pro is slower, presumably because it has a larger, heavier battery pack. The Max car is a very different story. It has more than double the power, 495 kilowatts and 838 newton meters of torque. Its 0 to 100 km/h sprint is an absolutely buck-wild 2.78 seconds. In order to achieve the fastest possible acceleration times, we need to revisit this little nubbin down here on the bottom right. You see, this isn't just a scroll wheel for choosing your drive modes. If you hit the center here, it's also a button that activates an overboost function on the electric motor, or I guess whatever the equivalent of an overboost function is for an electric motor. For 20 seconds, it gives you max power. The difference is noticeable. The SU7 isn't just quick, it's also fast, at least for an EV. It's got a top speed of 265 km/h, which is faster than both a Tesla Model 3 Performance and a Taycan Turbo S. Just saying. Use that nice steering wheel to throw it into a corner, and lo and behold, it actually feels good. The steering is very low effort, even in sport mode, but it's also more communicative than almost any EV that I have ever driven. It does not feel as agile or flickable as a Tesla Model 3, but I would chalk that up to the fact that it has a longer wheelbase, and honestly, it's also heavier. The lightest version of the SU7 tips the scales at about 2,000 kilograms or 4,400 pounds. That's about 200 kg heavier than a standard Tesla Model 3.
The SU7's double wishbone front suspension and 5-link rear make for a nice trade-off between body control and ride quality. That's especially true on the Max version, which has dual-chamber air suspension with adjustable height and stiffness.
Apart from the outright speed, I actually didn't find the driving experience of the Max and standard car to be as different as you might expect. The air suspension of the Max was able to absorb road imperfections a lot better, and it also stayed flatter in corners, but I really enjoyed driving this standard car because its limits felt much more approachable on public roads. One thing that is unique to the Max version of this car is something called Master Mode. When you turn on Master Mode, you're allowed to adjust many more aspects of its driving experience, from things you'd expect, like the weight of the steering and the response of the accelerator, all the way down to different individual levels of intervention for the traction control and the ESP. Now, that last one I haven't really seen on very many other EVs, but it's not a new thing in the grand scheme of things. What I didn't expect to be able to do was adjust this car's power distribution down to the exact percentage point. I don't mean that you're literally moving more power to the front or more power to the back. The connection, or rather there is no connection between the front and rear motors on this car, so that's physically impossible. When you adjust the slider in that mode, what you're actually doing is lowering the power on the front or the back. So for example, if you move the slider towards the back, you're lowering the power on the front motor. So you make the car feel more like a rear-wheel drive vehicle, to the point where you can turn it completely off and make it purely rear-wheel drive, or the other way around. If you move the slider all the way towards the front, what you're doing is making it essentially a front-wheel drive car. Your car will be noticeably slower because you are actually lowering the power that's going to one of the motors, but it also changes the way that it drives and creates a unique opportunity. Let's say you wanted to learn how to drive an all-wheel drive vehicle on the racetrack. You could do it in a SU7 Max. If you wanted to learn how to drive a front-wheel drive vehicle, do it in a SU7 Max. If you wanted to learn how to drive a rear-wheel drive vehicle, or anywhere in between front-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive bias, you could do it in a SU7 Max. This is the kind of innovation that I think we need to have in electric cars in order to make sure that there's a future in which people like us who actually like to drive can still have fun. This being a Chinese EV in the year 2024, it of course has to have an advanced driver assistance system. Xiaomi calls theirs Xiaomi Pilot, and it comes in two different flavors. There's Pro and Max. Pro costs $2,500 USD and Max costs $3,700 USD. The difference is that Pro is only available on the standard cars without LiDAR, whereas Max is available on the Pro and Max trim levels of the SU7 that do have a LiDAR unit. The major difference between the two systems is that Pro only has highway NOA, or navigation on autopilot, whereas the Max version has highway and city NOA. I wasn't able to use the Max City NOA when I drove the car equipped with the Max driver assistance system, but I was able to use the highway version, and it's fine. I would say it's comparable to other systems. I want to reiterate that I wasn't able to use it for that long, so I won't be able to do a full review. Hopefully, we'll be able to drive more cars from Xiaomi in the future with the system and give you a more comprehensive look at what it can do. Before we reach the conclusion of this video, I should probably address another hot topic when it comes to the SU7, and that is quality. You see, this thing's been on the market for about 2 months now, and we've already seen stories like overheating brakes on the racetrack, or thin paint and lumpy seats, even fenders that you can allegedly pull off with your bare hands. These are real issues, and Xiaomi needs to deal with them as they ramp up production over the course of the next year. However, if you think that some quality issues on early production vehicles is going to be enough to keep people from buying this car with all of these features, with this range, with this space, I think you are out of your mind. I think a lot of people outside of China saw this car and almost immediately dismissed it as a knockoff of a Porsche. I hope after watching this video you understand what a uniquely stupid way that is to approach the SU7, because it misses the point entirely. The takeaway needs to be this. In order to compete in the Chinese EV market, the largest and most influential EV market in the world by far, this is the standard you are going to have to meet in terms of range, price, connectivity, and performance. All I can say is, good luck.